Okay, it looks like we are live, and I think we're ready to go. Okay, so again, welcome everyone to February's episode of The Roadshow. And this month, our episode is called Divinely Dramatic, and we're going to talk about paranormal fiction. We have a great panel assembled for you today. So I'd like to introduce our panel. Sandy Young. We're featuring Sandy as our, there it is. Love that cover. Divinely Dramatic, which I just finished, by the way. We'll talk about that. So Sandy is wrapping up her series. It's a big year for you, Sandy. You've got two. You had your Divinely Dramatic just came out in February, which we just celebrated earlier this month. And then you have your third book, which is called The Ghostly Diva, and that's coming out in May.
May 1st. So yes, I have two releases within 3 months, which is
That's
crazy.
crazy.
Not well with our press schedule and with the holidays and such. So woohoo!
Well, congratulations! What a year! That's awesome. And so you are with Wild Rose Press, and we're going to talk about your very impressive collection of vintage clothing. And you do community theater, and you sing, and you do all sorts of things. We're going to get to all of that. And so, welcome, Sandy. I'm so happy you're here.
Thanks, Lee. I'm excited to be with everyone.
And Barbara Davis, thank you so much for coming back. This is your second time on the Roadshow. We're so excited to see you again. So, Barbara, we're going to talk about, in fact, I think we're talking about the Echo of Old Books, but I think we can bring back The Keeper of Happy Endings. We've got some magic in there, but you're always a little history, a little mystery, some romance, and sprinkling in a little bit of magic. And Barbara gave up, as many of us did, gave up a career in the corporate world to pursue her love of writing. It's worked out wonderfully, and we're all very happy you did. And Barbara, you've lived everywhere, right? But you're in Central Florida now.
Yes, I have lived Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, New Hampshire. Now I'm back in Florida, and I'm staying.
You're just making your way up and down. My daughter's in Florida and told me it's the coldest winter they've had in a long time.
It's insane. I haven't been to the pool in months.
That's what she said. That's what she said. So anyway, but thank you so much for joining us today, Barbara. And we have Carrie Schaefer. So Carrie Ann King I love this. She says she's the sidekick, alter ego, and touchier, feelier doppelganger of Carrie Schaefer. So I love that. I love that description. And you have 13 published novels. Congratulations on that. And we're going to be talking about Improbably Yours when we talk about paranormal fiction today. And thank you so much for joining us. What happened to your green, did it go away?
I fixed it while we were off trying to fix the internet.
I thought it was intentional. See, I was very impressed by that.
The green sparks of magic. Yeah, no, I made it go away.
I thought you did that for effect. I like that. But anyway, so thank you for being here, Carrie.
My pleasure.
And Gail Leeson is the pseudonym for Gail Trent. So Gail, I'd like you to talk about that later. You have lots of pseudonyms. You write under many different names. Yes, you like to keep people guessing. I like that. And you live in Virginia. You've also written as Amanda Lee. And so we're going to talk about your different series and your different pseudonyms. I'm interested to know, the different what they have to do with your different series. But we're going to be talking about your ghostly fashionista mystery series. So you and Sandy have that fashionista thing in common. So we're very anxious to hear about all of that. So thank you so much for being here, Gail. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, and we have, let's see, Grace is here, Barbara's here. Oh, I wanted to remind you if you allow StreamYard to access to your Facebook name, and then we'll know who you are. If you don't do that, then you just come up as Facebook user. So nobody wants to be known as Facebook user. So I always like to remind people of that. All right, let's start with, we were talking a little bit before we went live about paranormal fiction. So we want to clear this up. So Sandy, why don't you start us off and tell us what is really the definition of paranormal fiction?
Well, paranormal fiction is a broad category, but what we're looking at today and why we're all talking together is we take it to a softer side. It's not the werewolves and shifters and vampires. It's more soft elements, and it could be ghostly, which a couple of us have, or it's powers like psychometry, which Barbara and I both dip into and carry as well. So these are powers that are people, they're just your neighbors next door that you could run into, but they have these special abilities that they have to acclimate to. Sometimes they don't want to accept them. They get them in trouble in some of our books, but they're not scary. These aren't going to take you down a horror or road, but you're also going to find lovely romances in our books, and you'll find mystery in our books. So we're wrapping these around an emotional journey as well that people can relate to. So I think it's really important to note that there are a lot of different categories of paranormal, but from my view, we have all gone down a softer, approachable view. And I have, I've read everyone's books, so I feel confident in saying that.
I think that's an important distinction, because I think when you hear the word paranormal, I mean, not everyone, but I think certainly some people might think scary or horror, and so I think that's an important distinction, especially when you talk about women's fiction, because as you touched on, there's still that element of, there's that emotional journey of a character. And as you said, these are people, real people. They're people or people you live next door to. It's not that they're these fictional, as you said, werewolves or witches, and they're on these, fantastical islands. Does anybody else want to add to that in terms of how you sort of see your books in that paranormal lane?
I personally was a little taken aback by the use of the word paranormal amongst us, because I don't think of my books as paranormal, or I guess Barbara's either, but it makes perfect sense, because the meaning of paranormal is outside of the normal. And so, I have a tendency to think of paranormal as ghosts and unworldly creatures, but it makes perfect sense, actually. So
well, I grew up on reruns of Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie and all those fun shows. And so paranormal was fun to me. And so I make it fun in the books. It's like, like I loved Endora, how she would be like the fly on the wall watching everything that was going on or whatever. And sometimes Samantha knew she was there and no one else did. And it was just cute to me. It was really funny. And I liked that dynamic and that quirky sense of fun.
I think in my books, almost all of my last 1, 2, 3, the last 3, and then the one I just finished, all have, the paranormal, kind of the magical realism element. And for my books, I sort of use that magical gift as part of the emotional journey. Sort of accepting it and navigating it is also part of the main character's journey into learning about themselves. And the reason they can't accept this gift is oftentimes tied to other things that are unresolved in their lives, so that when they accept one, the other starts to fall into place and they kind of come together. It's sort of like, I kind of call it everyday magic. I think
I think that's
a lot of us women in our family, especially, that have some kind of intuitive something, the grandmother that always knew when trouble was brewing, or the mom who always knew the weather, or just so it's not the way we use it in our books. To me, does not feel far-fetched at all. It just feels like an extension that we're tapping into on the emotional side of our character.
Yeah, and you're in the Echo Hole books, you're right. Ashlyn is definitely her, and we'll talk about psychometry and how what just being near a book would give her that feeling about the owner. But you're right, she was definitely working through things in her own life, so they're inexorably tied together, and that's where the journey comes in. I I was thinking this morning about, TV shows that, of course, I give myself away. I do lie about my age, but I'll give something away here. I was thinking about Bewitched, and I have much younger siblings. And I remember one time we unpacking one of our houses and like, oh, why can't we just all do this and make it all be put away? And my younger siblings were like, what are you talking about? Yes, exactly. And Jeannie, and they're like, what are you talking about? Because of course it was before their time. But yeah, I agree. I think quirky. One of you said quirky, and I think that's a good word to describe some of, and certainly we'll talk about the more the fashionista side. There's that fun element, but there's drama, and there are problems. These are real people with problems, and then also the maybe a little bit heavier topics in some of your writing. So let's talk about the types of, what do we call them? Talents. I think talents, even though sometimes, as you said, Sandy, sometimes these characters don't really want these abilities, but they have them anyway. So let's talk about that. Carrie, why don't you start? Let's talk about, and probably yours, what is your character's talent or ability?
She doesn't really have one, honestly. So in my book, Other People's Things, my main character has an unusual talent in that when she picks up an object, often that object will signal that it's not where it belongs. And she feels obligated to move it somewhere else, which gets her in a lot of trouble. She's been in and out of jail. She's getting divorced. All those kinds of things happen to her because, well, if you're moving things that belong to people, that can be a little problematic.
So she doesn't make the objects move, she actually picks them up and moves them.
She picks them up and moves them. So her gift is knowing.
I'm hearing a lot of background noise. I'm not really sure where it's coming from, but I'm hearing an echo in my background noise, so I apologize if I'm talking over you. So Carrie, in Improbably Yours, though there is an element, there's a mystery to be solved. Your character, I love how you describe it. It's described in the description as, and I have it queued up, ready to go. She's on the fast track to the life she never wanted, which so many of us.
Well, her family all knew what they thought she wanted. Her mother is very, very big on, planning her life for her. And she has a sister who's very motivated and driven. So the magical thing that my character does, I guess, is when she's a child, she draws a map. She makes up a map of an island and she puts a treasure chest or a mark on it where there's treasure and whatever. And then she forgets all about it. And on her 30th birthday, it's presented to her at a garden party as a gift from her deceased grandmother, that she needs to go to this place that she drew as a map. And she's like, there is no such place. I made that up. Well, it turns out there is. So that's her, her little bit of magic.
Okay, and that directive comes from her so her grandmother wants her to go and solve this mystery.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so Barbara, tell us a little bit about, so Ashlyn in Echo of Old Books, and then I think, like I said, we can talk about Keep Our Happy Endings because there's that bit of magic in terms of all the brides who would wear the dresses. But in Echo of Old Books, tell us about Ashlyn and the ability that she has.
It's funny. I didn't know it was a gift when I started writing the book, this gift that she has. So I started looking things up and I was like, oh my God, this is a thing, which was kind of fascinating. It's called psychometry. And it is the ability to read emotions and physical ways. And in this case, it is books. Strictly books that she is able to read. She can hold a book and she can read the emotions of the previous owner of these books. Like she can tell if they were happy when they read them, if they were suffering from and she owns a book. So this sort of surrounding, which is also sort of overwhelming.
I have to ask, does anyone have another program open that might be causing, are you hearing the background noise that I'm hearing?
Yeah, very loud.
So I'm wondering if maybe does anyone have another program open that might be causing that?
It closed all mine.
Yeah, I can't figure out. I don't have anything.
Sometimes it helps if everybody puts in earbuds when you're getting echo. I tried mine, it didn't do anything.
Sometimes it doesn't matter what you do.
It's
Can we now though? Do you still hear it?
No, I think now it's gone. Can we blame it on psychometry? I don't know. I don't think we can.
It's my fault. I was talking, so it was me.
No, I think Barbara, I think you might have cured it because I don't hear it anymore. So I think we're good to go now. Yeah, I thought, wow, there's a name for this, because when I was reading your book, I thought I didn't realize that either. That there's an actual name for
it. I had no idea. So I was sort of tickled, to be able to find that and to actually be able to use the names of the scientists and the psychologists who named it. So it gave it it grounded it a little bit more for readers that, hey, this isn't quite as woo-woo. All this stuff that we think is woo-woo isn't quite as woo-woo as we think it is.
Right.
It's a little bit more everyday magic than we think it is.
Yeah, and Sandy, we were talking about that a little bit. People do have these. So tell us about in your books, the auras and the visions. Talk about that. But as we were saying, there are people who have these talents, whether they want them or not. And like Barbara said, it's not quite so out there as we might think.
Yes, one of my friends was telling me that she has another friend who sees auras around people. And so I can't wait to talk to her about that. But in my books, the first one, Divine Vintage, the lead off to the series, Tess has psychometry. She owns a vintage shop, but I called it more of a clothing empath, where when she touches the vintage clothing, she sees visions back to the past. She literally envisions, and it gets better at it. It develops more as she goes on. Her assistant, Marcy, is an artist as well. And in Divinely Dramatic, she gets her story, and she's developed a talent to see color auras. And that leads her to a mystery in the costume loft of a community theater where she is reluctantly agreed to costume. And then in The Ghostly Diva, Justine, the third one, at one point I say they're kind of like the sisters in Charmed, they each have a different ability. Yes. She can literally see ghosts, and it gets stronger to where she's seeing and talking with a very realistic ghost, like Gail has in her books as well. And it's fun. It's really fun to develop those different talents with people. And as you talk to it, you'll have people say, oh yeah, I know a friend who has visions and channel. I know a friend who sees ghosts, and all these different things that you do hear of. And Barbara's nodding at that.
Yep. Absolutely. I was going to ask you about that you probably get a lot of feedback from people who say, either I have one of these abilities, or I know someone who does. People who read your books, I'm sure you hear that a lot. So Gail, you have a flapper ghost, which okay. So where did this, so your series, you just released, the latest release was book 5.
Right.
In your
Secrets
series.
And sequins.
We'll talk about, and I love your covers are great. Your titles are great. I've been admiring all of your work, even though I haven't gotten to all of your books. I will. So tell us about, so is it the same? So it's a flapper ghost. Is it the same ghost in all 5 books that inhabits the shop that your main character owns?
Yes. And her name is Maxine Engelbright. And yes.
Okay.
And she hates that name. It's such a mouthful. So she asked to be called Max. And it's, if you've ever seen the show, Mrs. Fisher's Murder Mysteries, or Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries, I fell in love with that show. And I kind of based Max on Miss Fisher, Franny Fisher.
Miss Fisher's the ghost in the show.
Yes. And Amanda, the fashion designer, she's more like Dot. She's a little more conservative. And Max is not conservative. She's just, woohoo, let's go. For example, when in the first book, she immediately wants to solve the mystery. And Amanda reminds her, well, you can't get killed. I can't. So, also, I think your subconscious kind of plays into what you write, because my children, I have boy-girl twins who are grown now and out of the house. And so one of Max's things is that she desperately wants to help Amanda at times, and she can't because she can't reach out. She can't touch her. And she can manipulate electronics, but she can't physically help her. And I think that's something that I have struggled with as a mom, is not being able to physically be there with my children when they might need me. So I can give Max a lot of funny moments,
Right.
like that. But I think it also rings true because I understand that feeling of, oh, I've got to do something, but what can I do? I'm here and they're there. And even though Max is with Amanda in the shop, there's still only so much that she can do.
I think that's very accurate. That your psyche makes its way into, the things that are important to you, or the things that you worry about, or the things that you feel like you can't do anything about, or those are the things that definitely make their way into your writing, for
Right.
sure. That's an excellent point. Carrie, one of the things I think one of the things within probably yours, and certainly talk about your other books as well, that this not living the life you're supposed to live.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that as a theme.
I think that's a theme in probably everything that I've written as I think about it. And I think that's because my life started off that way. I grew up in a very conservative Christian family. I went to a very small Christian school. I never even had a real English teacher until I hit my senior year of college. And so it took me a long time to be able to step out of the life I fell into and really didn't want, and find, a life of my own. I actually wrote a book called A Borrowed Life, which is very, very much on that theme. But and probably yours, definitely. Her mother has things that she wants for her. Her boyfriend has things that he wants for her. Her sister is jealous of her, but they still, the only person who ever got her and wanted her to have her own life was her grandmother, who died when she was very young. So she, grandma, in being a very interesting person on her own, sets her up to be able to sets her up so that she has to take some time away from everybody and go out and venture into, who am I really? Who do I really want to be? Which is all revolves around this weird treasure hunt on this little reclusive island in the middle of nowhere, which is filled with quirky people. And she has some time and space. Also in the little haunted house that she ends up staying in, to think about what she really wants and make a change. So it's my favorite theme. I write it all the time, whether I mean to or not. I actually, as Carrie Schaefer, actually do write straight up what I think is paranormal. There are ghosts and scary characters, and even my characters in those books are discovering who they really are and who they really want to be.
Yeah, I think, of course, the noise is bad, so we have to make that go away. I'm not really sure what it's from, but I think just like Gail was saying, as you said, it's your favorite theme, because I think in a lot of, I don't want to speak for all women, but I think many women, many people, I would say, you get to a certain point and you think, is this really, what I want to be doing or where I should be? And I think that's so prevalent. You get to, you go through certain phases in life. And you sometimes take a step back and think, is this really where I'm supposed to be? And have I been doing things for me or for other people? And when is it time to say, okay, now it's time to choose me? So I think that's a theme that just resonates with so many people,
right?
Especially
and it's such a difficult thing, actually. I think especially for women. I'm also a mental health counselor, and that definitely is the theme of most of my clients. How do I get to be myself in this world rather than who everybody else wants me to be, or who I think I should be? The should word, a bad word.
there's what makes everyone else happy, and there's what makes you happy, and they're almost never the same. And it is. It's a tragedy. But I think resonates with many people.
That's one of the
We
things.
sacrifice. People sacrifice for others. You know, in Divinely Dramatic, Marcy's sacrificing. Well, her mother doesn't want her to sacrifice. She's got rheumatoid arthritis. She is a talented potter, but she's now her hands. She can't do it anymore. And Marcy wants to stay and take care of her. She doesn't want to pursue her dream of being a children's illustrator. And Mom's like, get out of the nest. And you know, there's that drama between the two of them, and. You see that too.
Yeah.
They're sacrificing, but it's not really what they should be doing. And so that's part of their journey, is coming to realize, you know, more purely what other people need, what they need, and, you know, moving forward on that path. And I think that's probably something, you know, we really all do. We take them through the emotional ringers and plop them out in a better place.
Absolutely. Barbara, I think you were going to say something.
Well, in my books, a common theme, probably because it resonates, like Carrie, it resonates with me personally, is my characters. I like for my characters to come to a place in their journey where they suddenly realize it doesn't matter who they've been. It doesn't matter what expectations were put on them. They can rewrite their stories from where they are right now. They can pivot and rewrite the end of their story. The pen is in their hands. And I think so many women, especially, because there are so many roles that we're sort of plunked into just by being female, that we don't often figure out, like, at the end of this road, where do I want to be? We're just like, we're thrust on a path, which thrusts us on a path, which thrusts us on a path. Mm-hmm. And we get to be my age and we're like, wait a minute. You know, and I mean, I have reincarnated multiple times in different careers, and I'm finally now, it took me till I got to 50 to figure it out. This is where I want to be. But in the meantime, it never dawned on me that I could make a choice and say, you know what, I get that I'm good at this, but I don't like it very much. I'd like to do something else. If I was good at it, that was where I felt like I needed to stick. Because that's where the praise was, that's where the financial security was. And then, you know, suddenly something happens in your life when you're thrust out of that comfort zone and you're like, what the heck? Let's, you know, let's rewrite.
It's almost like you reach a point where you give yourself permission to
That's exactly what it is.
The end of your story. Absolutely.
Right.
So Sandy, tell us about it. So Sandy and Gail, you've got the fashionista thing going. We want to hear, definitely, Sandy, we can see in the background you have an impressive collection I've been reading about. And I actually had the pleasure, I would just like to say, of meeting Sandy. We had the pleasure of meeting in person in Chicago. We were both at the Women's Fiction Writing Association conference, and we had the pleasure of meeting there. So that was lovely. And that was right when Sandy came on Bookish Road Trip to be our Instagram guru, which, Sandy, by the way, people like me who create the need for an Instagram guru, those of us who can't do it. But talk to us about your collection of your vintage clothing. And Gail, then we'd love to hear from you as well. You have an interest in this as well.
I do have a huge collection. I've been collecting over 30 plus years, and it really tied into my theater background. I was first a journalist, then nonprofit management, but I started doing theater, and I was really into theater. So the writing took a back seat until I gave myself permission, as we were saying, to retire early from nonprofit management and write. But in the meantime, I was amassing this collection of clothing, because wearing costumes on stage, I was like, these are really cool. And I found that going out into Goodwills and other places or estate sales, I could get really cool stuff. And now I just go to the local theaters, and they'll sell things off. The other day for $1 a piece, I walked away with 30 pieces again. But this series, Divine Vintage, it all wraps that theme, that vintage clothing. As we talked about passions and loves, that was the main one, was just that homage to vintage clothing. And then also my county, because they're set in my county. And theater, this one is that backstage at theater, because anybody who's done theater, Carrie, I know you have, it's chaos and camaraderie, as you said in your blurb, that it's a wonderful family. So I think as authors, we're trying to introduce our readers to new things, and we have our brands. Mine is vintage clothing and the performing, and it's so cool. And as you said, that we've given ourselves permission to wrap all this around and write about it, and share it with other people. And hopefully they're enjoying, these little pieces of ourselves, because we all come out in our books, as we said.
Oh, exactly.
And so this is a huge part of mine. And this is why I'm wearing polka dots, because it's polka dots on the cover. Vintage polka dots.
I want to know where I can get the dress that's on the cover of that book. I love that dress, but
you can get it in pink. It is a costume, and it's in pink. I haven't bought it yet, and it
okay.
won't buy, but it actually is available online.
Okay, I love that. And I love how you just show the costume. You don't show the person's face on the cover, and I love that. So do you have a certain era? I can see there's one behind you that looks more sort of
60s, because there's a 1966 mystery in Divinely Dramatic. There's Edwardian 1913 mystery in Divine Vintage, and then it's more late 70s, 80s for the Ghostly Diva. So they're all different eras and tying into the mystery.
Okay. And so, Gail, what is your interest in fashion? Your character also has a dress shop?
Yes, she is a retro fashion designer, meaning that she uses vintage patterns to create clothing. And she does custom one-of-a-kind pieces, and then she does some off-the-rack pieces that are that could be worn every day, that have that panache of maybe the 40s, 50s, 60s. And she also, as like the only fashion designer in town, she has other things that she does. Like for book 2, she does costumes for Beauty and the Beast. I think for the 3rd book, she does Renaissance Fair, costumes for that. And of course, just a lot of things, special things and it gives me a lot of leeway to work in different themes and different things to go on.
And do you also collect vintage?
I don't collect a lot of vintage, but I do love them. I love clothes. A long time ago, my mother-in-law, she was the seamstress in the family, and she was incredible. She made me like a Queen Elizabeth gown, and it was green, and it weighed like 50 pounds. And I had the Tudor hood, and it was fantastic. And I still have that.
Do you also act? Do you do community theater? Do you do any type of theater?
No, I love it. And I have gone before. Like, I had a character called Myrtle Crumb, and this was the Between a Clutch and a Hard Place. And the Myrtle Crumb series is in KU, and it was a lot of fun. But I went to the local theater and I said, "Can you make me look older?" And she said, "Wow, that's a first." The makeup artist said, "We usually have women come in and say, 'Can you make me look younger?'" And so that was a lot of fun. I had the pillbox hat and the pencil skirt, and then I looked old.
And I just love the titles of everything in the series. I love the different clothing items that you see just even in your titles. They're so creative. So, Karen, did you say that you do theater?
Would you repeat that?
The noise is that. I don't know what that is. I apologize. I have no clue what that could be.
That's fine.
Carrie, did you say that you also do theater?
I have done. I did a fair bit of the kids when we were younger. I did a lot of backstage help with costumes and set, for the sets and stuff. And then we did a spell where I actually did also do some of the acting in the community theater, and we had a great time. That was really fun. So I love it. It's just been a while.
Sounds so fun. So I want to get back to Barbara. Your book is really 2 books in one. And I think some of you also can speak to that, not with the dual timelines and so forth, but tell us a little bit about with the Echo of Old Books, how it's really two books in one, two fabulous books in one.
Well, it's sort of three,
It
actually.
really is. Yes. Now that you say that, it is.
The main character, main character in the contemporary timeline owns a rare bookstore, and she runs across two books that appear out of nowhere. There's no author names on them. There's no publisher's name. There's no copyright date. They're just these beautifully bound books. And she, because of her ability to feel emotions, she realizes these books are connected somehow. They have the same kind of energy, very painful loss and anger. And as she is investigating these books, I am writing these books between these a couple from a doomed affair that actually seem to be talking. It's like an argument. They're arguing about whose fault it was, who betrayed whom. It was actually like writing three books, and I can tell you, I would never do that again.
Oh, really?
It was really an experience, but it was really hard to give the voices a distinct feel, to write the same love affair from two different perspectives, but have it not feel repetitive, because basically they're covering the same ground. They're just pointing the finger in the opposite direction. So that was a lot of work. And then I had to weave a contemporary story and a love affair through that, along with Ashlyn's journey to sort of deal with her past and trust herself to be able to belong to something again. So there was a lot going on.
Oh, I as I was reading it, and you did a great job. I mean, you're right. They were literally telling the same story, but pointing the finger. No, it was your fault. No, it was your fault. No, this is what happened. No, this is what happened. And I was thinking as I was reading it, like, oh my gosh, how did you keep it all straight, and then also bring in the more modern part of it? But you did a great job. I mean, if you think about it, I think that's, if you would talk to two people who broke up many years ago, that's probably what you would get. In a lot of instances, you get one person saying, here's what happened, and the other one saying, no, this is what happened.
And then of course, by the end, Ashlyn has unraveled what really happened,
right?
Which none of them knew, that there were other factors at play,
right?
So it's a mystery and a love affair and a mystery. There's a lot going on.
Yes, great. It's a great story. Does anyone else want to talk about the dual timeline, or kind of the story within a story?
It's my favorite. All my books are dual timeline, all of them.
I go dual with the first two really are more through the psychic visions. You get the 1913 time, you do see a lot of that. And none of my books started out mysteries when I first wrote them. So I, like you did, Barbara, with all these different elements, wove a mystery back into it and created suspects and such. So that was really interesting to create mysteries as I went along. But then there's the visions again with Divinely Dramatic of the 1966. What happened with that theater-related death, and then with the Ghostly Diva, I really enjoyed that because I gave that ghost her own chapters, and her story is it has more drama to it. I found it very compelling, and so it's modern day and her story and her trying to drive the modern narrative to solve. Drive her son toward meeting the father that she never revealed to him, the famous father. So anyway, the dual timelines, I love them too. I love to read them, and I like to write them. But they do give. I think we all make it hard on ourselves because we're blending all these things instead of just one definitive genre. I like too much.
Two books in one, and if you're not careful, for me anyway, that historical character that you're getting, that character from the past, it's so much fun to play with that voice and that world that it can actually consume the narrative of today, the more modern narrative. everybody's like, oh, I wanted more, and why didn't you, give us more Belle? Well, because they don't let me write 600-page books. At some point, you have to pick and choose what makes the cut and what doesn't. But those characters, they get in your head and they come to life, and they start telling you things that you didn't realize when you set out to write the book. And all of a sudden, like Sandra said, you've got to go back and weave that in, and then you've got to go back and change. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of weaving and a lot of balance. You have to keep that balance, or otherwise you can lose one thread of that story can easily become subsumed by the juicier bits.
Absolutely. The balance is something that I think, as people read and review our books, that's was always been pleasing to me when reviewers say there's all this in here. There's this and this and this and this and this, but it all weaves and it balances so well. And then this is a sigh of relief, as you said, that you have done that difficult task that you set out to do and bring all these elements in, because certainly you could have something overpower. So I don't think that's something folks would really realize reading these books, if they sat back and analyze how much challenge I guess we put on ourselves.
Right. I like the concept. I like the use of the word weaving. And I really think that's what it is. I'll always, like, if I get stuck, I dropped a thread. Like, I have to go back and see which thread I dropped, where I dropped it, and then have to pull it back in and just weave. There's one of my favorite fantasy series, which is it's called the Fiona of Our Tapestries. And there's a moment where somebody says where the writer says, the weaver at the loom pauses and then gathers in the new thread and weaves it into the tapestry. And I love that little moment in that book. And that really is kind of how writing is for me, and it sounds like for all of you as well, is that you're just trying to hold all those threads and keep.
When you come up with the concept, what if, and I know exactly I always know exactly where I was when I get the idea for all of my books. But when that first concept lands on you, they land on me sort of fully formed. It sounds such a great idea, and it seems like you have it all worked out. This will happen. Then you sit down to actually try to make it happen, and you're like, "What was I thinking?"
How many drafts?
My books lie to me. That's really funny that you say that, because mine tempt me in with this will be fun. This time it'll just be fun. It'll be easy. We're just going to have fun and easy. And I'm like, oh yeah, I have the beginning and I start writing. And then as Barbara O'Neill calls them, the girls in the basement, say, oh, hey, we didn't tell you, but maybe you should know.
Yeah. I have an ex-wife.
Yeah, it's funny. You think you have the whole thing in your mind, and I'm just going to sit down and pound this out. And it is funny. That's why, and I think Gail said it, I think you all alluded to it. It's nice to have things like a dress shop or whatever it might be, where you can bring people in, because as you're writing, you're thinking, how am I going to tie this to this? And so, wait a minute, I'll just, like you said, drag someone out of the basement and kind of weave that thread in there and have it come together. But when you do these dual timelines, as you ladies, I mean, it's like taking something really hard, writing a book, and making it really much harder. So I admire that. I admire that very much.
My husband's still waiting for me to write an easy book. Like, every book I write gets more and more complicated and more, hey, what if I tried to bend this? Because now I'm considering writing a time slip novel, which he's like, oh God, please don't do that, because I don't know anything about it, but I want to try it. And he's like, when are you going to write an easy book? Just a book that, and I keep thinking they're all going to be easy.
That's the thing. And when it starts out and you get the idea, you think, okay, I've got this. This is going to be easy. And no, it's certainly not.
It's a seduction at the beginning. The idea is like, it's seduction. And you're like, yeah. Then you get to that saggy middle and you're like, oh man.
That saggy middle is.
I got all these pieces and I have to somehow.
I know, that's what we always say. The first 20 pages and the last 20 pages, it's those pesky 300 in the middle that really.
Usually that's true for me. Right now, the book I'm writing really is pretty much a straight up mystery. And right now it's the tying everything together at the end that is being a challenge, being the biggest challenge.
Being the biggest challenge. So, and we're going. Well, so I feel like we've been talking for 5 minutes, and it's already winding down. But I wanted to. So, Sandy and Gail, the series. Gail, how far are you going to take this fashionista mystery series? I mean, how many do you envision writing?
I think in just until I run out of ideas for Max and Amanda, because I'm getting ready to start on the next book, and yeah, I hope to have that by mid to late summer.
Great.
And yeah, I'm looking forward to spending time with her again. But I have 4 series going, and that's the way you feel. Like I'm spending this time with this family, and then I move on to this part of the family, and then I go visit this family. So,
well, eating and sleeping are overrated. So,
right.
like 4 series, that's sure you've got this. And Sandy, the release in May, the 3 books in the series, and then will you perhaps start a new series? Or do you think that's the
I
end?
think that one is done. I actually have a finished historical fiction that an agent's waiting to see. And it's truth-based historical fiction, totally. So I've gone down the historical route with just one POV, which is something I don't do. So I dived into research heavily, tossed out all these other elements, but went really into the research to create somebody's life. So that's what I'm doing. I'm kind of switching genres, but unlike you guys who use pen names, I'm not planning to change a pen name. I think I can still make that pivot. So that's my next, is getting that one into the world.
Okay. And Carrie, talk a little bit about that. Talk about your pen names, all the different
pen
names.
name. I have a pen name because when I started writing women's fiction, my publisher made it conditional on to publish my work. They wanted me to take a pen name because they felt like the women's fiction was different enough from the fantasy and paranormal mystery that I'd been writing. They thought it would confuse readers. I believe that readers are way smarter than that, and it would not have been an issue. And really, what it's done is complicate my life, which is why I now have one website, allthingscarrie.com, because I used to have Carrie Ann King and Carrie Schaefer, and I'm like, this is insane. Right. So I'm trying to bring everything together, and I'm doing that more with my writing life now too. I have several books going on right now. The one that I'm finishing, it is, like I say, I want it to be a mystery series. This is a new mystery series I'm writing, but it definitely has an emotional journey in it. My main character is a party planner who gets sucked into planning a big send-off bash for a dying rock star who wants a huge party after his death, rather than a funeral, which is way out of her small town league. But then he dies before the day that he had planned to end his own life. He had cancer, and she thinks he's been murdered. So then she has to also, while planning the party, figure out, try and make people listen to her, because everyone's like, hey, he was dying anyway. Why are you worried about it? Well, because, right? So I have that, and then I'm actually doing a spin-off series that's also mystery on my novel Other People's Things. So I'm going to be doing a detective, a private investigator series with Nickel and Hawk. If you've read those books, you'll know who those characters are. Nickel is the one who has, I guess we're calling it psychometry, who touches objects, knows that they don't belong where they are, and she moves them. So she'll be using that for the power of good in these novels, mostly to help women who are in domestic violence situations. So that's I have those 2, and then I have another standalone that I'm finishing. So I'm hoping to have 3 done this year.
So you're working on 2 series and a standalone at the same time.
Yeah.
Again, no eating or sleeping for you. So
no. And thank you to whoever just said in the comments, I love Nickel and Hawk. Thank you.
We're all too ambitious, I can tell.
Well, speaking of that, let's if you would please tell everyone what you're working. Well, you've talked about what you're working on now, unless there's something I don't know what else you could possibly be working on now, but please tell us where we can find you, your website, your social. So Sandy, why don't you go first?
SandraYoungAuthor.com. There's some examples from my vintage collection that are actually in Divine Vintage.
Yes.
So if people want to see some of that or sign up for my Substack newsletter, come join me there. I'm otherwise Instagram and TikTok and Threads and Facebook.
You are, yeah, and you definitely, your reels are fantastic, and I love I love when you showcase your vintage clothing in your reels, and you just look like you should be on the stage performing. So
That's my silly theater
love
ham
it.
performer
No, it's great.
persona. Yeah.
That's awesome. It's so you, which is, that's great. You want people to see you, and those are awesome. Barbara, where can we find you?
Barbara Davis hyphen author.com. That's my website. And then I'm on Facebook and I'm on Twitter, but mostly that's a political thing. So you might want to steer clear.
Oh, I know.
I'm very, very rarely on Instagram. But one thing I do want to mention is that my Keeper of Happy Endings, which was my 7th novel, is currently being adapted for, we were talking about theater, is currently being adapted for Broadway musical.
Oh, wow.
Fantastic.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so it will be the 40s and the 80s. So lots of costuming, fun stuff there. And I just got the first 3 songs and the first 3 scenes, and it's a little funny. It's so much fun.
Let's all meet there. Let's all meet there and go see it together.
Yes, that would be awesome. Oh my gosh, congratulations. That's great. And Gail, where can we find you? What social
I'm at
website?
GailLeeson.com. And once you get to the homepage, you can click on Cozy Mysteries, which is the Ghostly Fashionista and the other cozy series that I have, or Portal Fantasies, because I have one Portal Fantasy series that I'm working on.
Okay, awesome. And we're going to do your giveaway in a second. Carrie, and you said you actually have a different, you didn't want to drive everybody crazy with all your names. So tell us how to find you.
Yeah, the best way to find me, I'm erratic on social media, although I am there. But look for me as All Things Carrie on Instagram. I'm on Facebook as Carrie Ann King mostly. But my website is the best place to find me. Go to allthingscarrie.com. When you're there, you'll get a little pop-up inviting you to sign up for my newsletter. And if you do that, you'll get a freebie short story in the Nickel and Hawk world. And you also get, I believe, a free paranormal novella. So free read for me, and you'll get an email probably about once a month that tells you what I'm doing, giveaways of books, all kinds of, tales of my Viking, fun stuff. And you can see a picture of my puppy that I had to duck out here for a second because he's behind me chewing on the couch while I'm trying to do this.
Your newsletter is great. You really want Carrie's newsletter.
I do have to admit, at first when I saw you have a real live Viking, I thought, Then I thought, no, that's got to be a pet. I was envisioning one of those hunky guys with the blonde, flowy hair.
Right. No, he's not the pet. No, the Viking's not the pet. He's Viking. He doesn't wear the hat, but he is definitely a Viking.
With a hat. Okay. All right, so let's do this. Sandy, you were our featured BRT tour guide today. So pick a number between 1 and 10.
9.
And don't you hate this? All right, let's see here if I can count you. Ooh. All right. I just said 9. Barbara Conry. My friend Barbara Conry. So Barbara, do you know how to get in touch with me? I'm going to be giving you a link so that you can get Gail's first book in her series. I'm sorry, Designs on Murder. So that's so fun. And Barbara, you know how to get in touch with me. So, but ladies, I want to thank you so much for joining me today and for telling us all about your work. And one of the things I love is that, and Sandy, as you said, paranormal is a big, that's a big umbrella, but I love the way you shared with us all the different nuances and all the differences in your work, and but also the common threads, which I think is something that all the things you talked about were so relatable to so many people. So thank you so much for being here today. And it was a great conversation, and it was lovely to see you all.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, Lee, and everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye, ladies.